There's a specific kind of solitude that comes from living inside a mind that refuses to settle for the surface. You've felt it for as long as you can remember, the way you could dismantle an argument before the other person finished building it, the way social gatherings felt like watching a play where you already knew the final act, the way silence became a comfortable companion, not because you lacked words, but because most words felt like echoes of things already said. You learned to mask it, to slow down your responses, so you didn't seem like you were racing ahead. But let's be honest about what that friction really is. It's not a social defect. It's a cognitive advantage you haven't fully understood yet. The ancient Stoics believed that most people are asleep, even when they're awake. They move through life on autopilot, driven by impulse, by the last thing they read, by the loudest voice in the room. They believed that the mind takes on the color of its thoughts. If that's true, then a mind that constantly questions, that rejects easy answers, that seeks the bedrock beneath the surface, isn't burdened, it's trained. And training always feels heavy before it feels natural. If you're the type of person who prioritizes precision over popularity and understanding over agreement, you're already practicing a form of ancient wisdom, whether you've given it a name or not. Also, if this resonates, consider subscribing to Stoic Mindset Mastery as a commitment to forging that sharper mind, to choosing awareness in a world that profits from your distraction. Most people form an opinion and it becomes part of their identity. Like a piece of furniture they'd never consider moving. They defend it, they polish it, they wrap their sense of self around it, because changing it would feel like renovating a room while still living in it. But your process is different. Before your view ever becomes a statement, it's already been through a rigorous internal review. You've tested it against its opposite. You've searched for its weaknesses. You've treated your own idea like a suspicious character until it proves its integrity. There's a silent tribunal inside your head, and your own conclusions are cross-examined before they're ever released into the world. This isn't self-doubt, it's intellectual rigor. The psychologist Carl Jung observed that thinking is a difficult art, which is why most people prefer to judge. You know this truth intimately. It's far easier to cling to a belief than to put it under a microscope. It's more comfortable to be decisive than to be accurate. Yet you've developed a deeper loyalty. You care more about aligning with reality than about winning an argument in the moment. That single preference shapes the entire architecture of your mind. Psychologists have a term for the strain you willingly tolerate: cognitive dissonance. It's the friction that occurs when two conflicting ideas occupy the same space. Most people rush to resolve that friction. They grab the nearest reassuring thought and hold on just to make the noise stop. You don't. You let the contradiction breathe. You allow two opposing truths to coexist long enough for a deeper truth to emerge from their collision. It's not comfortable. It feels like pressure building behind your eyes, like a knot forming in your stomach. But you've learned that insight is often the child of that very discomfort. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor philosopher, wrote that if someone can point out a flaw in his thinking, he will gladly change, because truth is more useful to him than his own pride. That willingness to evolve isn't a weakness. It's strength sharpened by the humility to know you're not finished. You aren't loyal to your initial take. You're loyal to what holds up under pressure. From the outside, this can look like hesitation. People might mistake your internal processing for indecision. They might think you're unsure, but the reality is you refuse to commit your life to a premise that hasn't been stress tested. You know that beliefs aren't abstract, they become actions, and actions become your character. So you refuse to let a belief steer you until it survived its own trial. That's why, when you finally do speak, your words land differently. They've been refined. They aren't reflexes. They are conclusions that have earned their place. Seneca, another Stoic master, taught that the unconquerable mind isn't one that never doubts. It's one that isn't afraid to examine itself. You've built that resilience quietly through thousands of internal debates no one ever saw. Over time, this habit changes your relationship with certainty itself. You start to see how brittle most opinions are. You notice how quickly they crack when gently pressed. You see how often people defend positions, not because they're true, but because they're attached to them. This awareness doesn't make you arrogant. If anything, it makes you deeply cautious. You understand how easy it is to be wrong. The philosopher Epictetus captured this perfectly. It's impossible for someone to learn what they think they already know. That idea is the engine of your intellect. As long as you keep interrogating yourself, you stay teachable. And as long as you stay teachable, your mind doesn't just age, it sharpens. There's another effect too. When you habitually take apart your own assumptions, you slowly separate your identity from your ideas. You stop seeing a challenge to your opinion as a personal attack. You start treating ideas like tools, not trophies. If a sharper tool comes along, you swap it out without ceremony. This flexibility is rare because it demands that the ego step aside. It requires admitting that the person you were yesterday didn't have all the answers. Yet every time you update your thinking, you feel something subtle but solid. Not shame, not loss. A quiet sense of alignment, as if you've moved a fraction closer to the way things actually are. That alignment becomes addictive. It's purer than approval. It's stronger than validation. This is why you argue with yourself before you argue with anyone else. You aren't trying to win a debate. You're trying to calibrate your perception. The internal debate isn't chaos, it's a tuning fork. And the more you use it, the more precise your judgments become. You spot logical gaps faster. You're harder to manipulate because you've already anticipated the counter-arguments. You grow comfortable with complexity because you've trained your mind to hold tension without collapsing into simple answers. This comfort with complexity sets the stage for the next layer of how your mind operates, how it moves ahead of the moment. You get bored in conversations that fascinate everyone else. It's not arrogance, it's not impatience. It happens because your mind has already finished the story before the last sentence is spoken. Someone starts building an argument, and you've already identified the flaw in its foundation. Someone shares a story, and you've already connected it to 3 other stories from your past. You sit there waiting, not because you're disengaged, but because your brain has quietly sprinted to the destination while everyone else is still walking the path. This creates a strange kind of isolation. You nod, you make eye contact, you laugh at the appropriate moments. On the surface, you're present, but internally, your thoughts have branched out. They've linked the current topic to a concept you studied years ago. They're comparing it to a problem you've been turning over in your mind. They're seeing patterns between this moment and a dozen others. It doesn't feel like daydreaming. It feels like your mind refusing to idle. Aristotle observed that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Your mind instinctively searches for that whole. It gathers fragments and assembles them into a larger picture, a more coherent map than the moment alone provides. Cognitive science supports what you've always sensed. People who process information quickly often experience a kind of restlessness in routine interactions. Their brains solve the visible puzzle early, so they start working on hidden ones. This isn't impatience, it's overflow. When your cognitive capacity isn't fully used by the current input, it reallocates itself to more complex background tasks. That's why you can listen to someone speak while simultaneously analyzing the structure of their argument, the emotional subtext, and the potential long-term implications of what they're saying. Your mind layers information. It doesn't just absorb it in a single stream. This layered processing shapes your social experience. You might start to wonder why ordinary exchanges feel thin. You might worry that something is wrong with you because you crave conversations that go deeper, faster. But this hunger for density isn't a flaw. It's a signal of how your mind is wired. Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life isn't worth living." You feel that truth in your bones. Surface-level talk feels like a script you've heard too many times. You're drawn toward meaning, toward analysis, toward the architecture beneath the words. There's a creative side to this too. When your mind wanders during slow moments, it isn't empty. It's building. It's connecting philosophy to personal experience. It's generating possibilities. Carl Jung wrote that, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." While others are absorbed in the outer narrative, your awareness often turns inward, exploring connections that aren't immediately visible. That inward turn isn't disengagement, it's construction. It's your mind refining its internal map while the external world moves at a slower pace. But this ability, as valuable as it is, carries a cost that shapes your relationships and your energy in ways you're only beginning to understand. You may struggle to feel fully in sync with those around you. Moments that energize others may leave you neutral or quietly fatigued. You might find yourself longing for fewer conversations, but deeper ones. And that longing can make you question whether you're too serious, too intense. Yet intensity is often just focus applied consistently. Your mind treats even casual conversation as a starting point. It immediately scans for direction, for depth, for where this could lead. When it senses there's no deeper layer, it quietly shifts its attention elsewhere. This shift is rarely visible. You've learned to mask it. You know how to respond, how to smile, how to stay socially aligned. But beneath that surface, you're running a different operating system. You're scanning for insight, for structure, for something that stretches you. When you find it, you light up. When you don't, your mind searches within. That search isn't contempt for others. It's simply the natural rhythm of a brain tuned to complexity. Epictetus reminded his students to make the best use of what's in your power and accept the rest as it happens. You can't slow your processing speed to match every environment. What you can do is understand it. Recognize that your boredom isn't emptiness, it's altitude. It signals that your baseline level of engagement is higher than the current setting. It invites you to seek conversations, ideas, and challenges that match your capacity rather than shrinking yourself to fit the room. When you stop interpreting this restlessness as arrogance or a defect, something shifts. You begin to choose your environments more carefully. You gravitate toward people who enjoy complexity. You invest your energy where it stretches you, not where it drains you. And gradually you understand that this pattern isn't random. It reflects the same precision you apply when you debate yourself internally. If you often find yourself mentally ahead of the moment, quietly assembling larger patterns while others focus on the immediate thread, that's not disconnection, it's confirmation. Your mind is operating at a different frequency, and that frequency, when understood rather than suppressed, is another quiet sign that it is unusually sharp. You change your mind without feeling humiliated. For many, shifting an opinion feels like a public surrender. It feels like weakness. They would rather defend a flawed position than endure the sting of admitting they were wrong. Their identity is fused with their beliefs, and any challenge to those beliefs feels like a personal assault. You've seen this in conversations, the way voices rise, the way logic becomes secondary to pride. You see how quickly people protect an idea simply because it's theirs. But you've learned to separate the two. You understand that a belief is something you hold, not something you are. That small distinction changes everything. You've held passionate beliefs before. You've defended certain views with conviction. Then new evidence appeared. A better argument surfaced, a deeper understanding formed, and instead of shame, you felt something different: clarity, relief, as if something that had been slightly out of place suddenly clicked into alignment. It didn't feel like losing, it felt like upgrading. That sensation reveals something crucial about your thinking. You aren't attached to being right in the moment, you're attached to being accurate over time. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, "If anyone can show me I'm wrong, I'll gladly change." That's not the mindset of someone weak. It's the mindset of someone who values truth more than ego. Psychologists call this cognitive flexibility. It's the ability to adjust your internal map when reality proves it incomplete. Many resist this because it threatens their stability. To admit error is to admit imperfection, and that can feel unbearable. But you've learned that resisting correction only delays growth. Seneca observed that it's better to conquer grief than to deceive it. In the same way, it's better to correct your thinking than to disguise its flaws. When you revise your beliefs, you aren't betraying your past self. You're refining it. You allow yourself to evolve without turning that evolution into drama. There's a steady humility in this process. Not the kind that erases you, but the kind that grounds you. You don't apologize for thinking deeply. You simply remain open to being wrong. Carl Jung said we cannot change anything until we accept it. That applies not just to emotions, but to ideas. When you accept that your understanding is always partial, you give yourself permission to grow. You don't cling to outdated views just because they once felt certain. You release them, and in that release, you make room for sharper insight. People may misinterpret this flexibility. They might think you're inconsistent or unreliable because you adjust your stance. But consistency isn't the same as integrity. True integrity is alignment with reality, not loyalty to an outdated position. You are consistent in one way only. You are committed to what is true as far as you can see it. That commitment makes your thinking precise. It allows you to move through complex situations without being trapped by yesterday's conclusions. Plato wrote that wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something. You speak when your thoughts have been refined, and when refinement requires change, you change. Over time, this approach strengthens your judgment in ways that others can't easily see, but that you feel with increasing certainty. You become less defensive, less reactive, more analytical. When someone challenges your view, you don't feel immediate hostility. You listen. You weigh their words against your own reasoning. Sometimes you remain firm, sometimes you shift. Either way, the decision is deliberate. You carry that principle quietly. As long as you remain teachable, your mind continues to sharpen. The moment you declare yourself finished, growth stops. Treating your opinions as hypotheses rather than heirlooms creates a powerful internal freedom. You aren't burdened by the need to appear unchanging. You can explore new ideas without fearing they will dismantle your identity. This doesn't mean you drift aimlessly. It means you anchor yourself in evidence and reflection, rather than pride. Each revision becomes a step forward, not a retreat. Each corrected error becomes proof that your mind is active and alert. This willingness to update yourself also affects how you relate to the world. You're less likely to fall into rigid camps. You're less likely to defend positions simply because they're popular or traditional. You evaluate claims carefully. You ask whether they withstand scrutiny, and if they don't, you let them go. That habit may isolate you at times, especially in environments where certainty is valued more than accuracy, but it also protects you from stagnation. You continue to evolve while others remain fixed. When you look back on your past beliefs, you don't feel embarrassed by how much they've changed. You feel grateful that they have. It means you were paying attention. It means you were learning. It means your mind refused to settle for convenience. A mind that revises itself isn't inconsistent, it's alive. In a world where many cling to ideas long after they've expired, your flexibility is rare. It keeps your thinking dynamic, it keeps your perception clear, and it quietly reinforces what these habits have been revealing all along. If you can change your mind without feeling diminished, your mind isn't fragile. It's unusually sharp. You notice what's missing before you notice what's present. Walk into a room and most people immediately catalog what they see. The furniture, the faces, the tone of the conversation. Your mind does something quieter and far less common. It registers the gaps. The person who should be there but isn't. The shift in energy when you entered. The topic that was carefully avoided. The question hanging in the air that no one dared to ask. You aren't searching for drama. You aren't trying to expose anyone. You simply perceive the empty spaces as clearly as others see the objects themselves. Absence contains information. In visual art, negative space defines the shape of the subject. Without the empty areas around it, the image collapses into chaos. In human interaction, the same principle applies. What is left unsaid often reveals more than what is spoken aloud. You may notice when someone answers a question too quickly, or when a detail is skipped without explanation. You sense when a plan sounds complete, but something essential has been quietly omitted. That sensitivity isn't imagination running wild. It's pattern recognition operating at a higher resolution. Carl Jung wrote that the most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm. But to overcome conflict, you must first detect it. You must recognize the tension that others ignore. Your awareness of absence is the first step toward that calm clarity. This habit makes you difficult to mislead. When someone presents a polished argument, you instinctively examine what was excluded. When a narrative seems convincing, you ask yourself, what evidence wasn't shown? It's not that you distrust everything, it's that you understand how easily people can frame reality by highlighting certain facts and hiding others. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Part of that power is learning to question the visible surface. When you focus on what's missing, you protect your mind from being shaped too easily by incomplete information. At times, this perception can feel isolating. Others may not understand why you hesitate when everything appears straightforward. They may think you're overanalyzing, but you aren't creating problems. You're identifying structural weaknesses before they collapse. Seneca observed that it's more fitting for a wise person to laugh at life than to lament over it. To laugh with wisdom, you must see its hidden contradictions. Your ability to sense the unspoken layer allows you to move through situations with a quiet advantage. You're rarely shocked by outcomes because you noticed the signs long before they became obvious. There's a mental discipline behind this. You have trained yourself, perhaps without realizing it, to scan for inconsistencies, a promise that doesn't match behavior, a confident statement that lacks supporting detail, a plan that ignores a crucial variable. Your mind fills in missing pieces the way a skilled architect sees the structure behind the walls. Plato said that reality is created by the mind, and we can change our reality by changing our mind. By examining absence, you refuse to let surface appearances dictate your perception. You reconstruct a fuller picture inside your own thinking, rather than accepting the first version presented to you. This way of seeing also shapes your relationships. You notice when someone's words and emotions don't align. You sense when a conversation avoids something important. You may even feel the weight of a silence that others dismiss. Epictetus advised his students not to explain their philosophy, but to embody it. You embody this philosophy of perception quietly. You don't announce every inconsistency you detect. You simply adjust your trust, your expectations, and your behavior based on what you observe. That restraint requires maturity. It's easier to confront immediately than to process patiently. But you choose patience because clarity matters more than reaction. Over time, you realize that your awareness of absence extends beyond conversations. It applies to opportunities as well. When evaluating a career path, you consider not only what it offers, but what it demands. When entering a commitment, you think about what will no longer fit into your life. You weigh trade-offs that others overlook. Aristotle noted that quality is not an act, but a habit. Your habit of examining the unseen increases the quality of your decisions. You don't rely solely on what is presented. You account for what is concealed or forgotten. This habit doesn't make you cynical. It makes you thorough. There's a difference. Cynicism assumes deception. Thoroughness examines possibility. You understand that every system, every story, every plan has gaps. Some are harmless, others are critical. By paying attention to absence, you reduce the chance of being blindsided. You become steady, less reactive, more deliberate. And although this perception can make you feel separate from those who operate only on visible details, it quietly strengthens your judgment. When you consistently notice what's missing before what's present, you operate with a depth that is hard to teach and even harder to measure. You see the structure beneath the surface. You read between lines without being told to. You navigate situations with a subtle awareness that others may not share. That awareness influences how you speak, how you trust, how you decide. It sharpens your understanding of reality in ways that aren't dramatic, but are deeply effective. And as these habits continue to reveal themselves, the pattern becomes clearer. A mind that perceives absence as information isn't ordinary. It's attentive, disciplined, and unusually sharp. But this constant scanning, this perpetual awareness, comes with a cost that becomes most apparent in social settings. You feel exhausted after socializing, not because you dislike people, not because you're shy or incapable of conversation. In fact, you can be articulate, thoughtful, even engaging when you choose to be. The fatigue comes from something deeper. While words are being exchanged, your mind isn't only listening to sentences, it's tracking tone shifts, subtle pauses, micro-expressions, small inconsistencies between what is said and what is felt. You notice when someone smiles a fraction too late. You catch the brief flicker of doubt before confidence returns to their face. You register the tension behind a casual joke. Most people hear content. You hear context. At the end of a gathering, others may feel energized by connection. You often feel drained, as if you've been carrying something heavy. That weight isn't emotional weakness, it's cognitive load. Your brain has been running multiple processes at once. It's been observing patterns in group dynamics, measuring sincerity, predicting reactions, and adjusting your own responses accordingly. You aren't just participating in conversation, you're decoding it. That decoding requires effort. It's like running several programs in the background while trying to maintain a smooth interface on the surface. This kind of awareness doesn't turn off easily. Even when you try to relax, your perception continues scanning. You may notice who dominates the conversation and who withdraws. You may sense unresolved tension between two people across the table. You may detect that someone's enthusiasm is forced. These observations arrive automatically. Carl Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. You're often making the unconscious visible in real time. You see beneath the surface, and that clarity takes energy. It demands attention that most people never expend. Because you perceive so much, you also adjust more. You might soften your tone to ease tension. You might steer a discussion away from conflict before it escalates. You might hold back a sharp insight to protect someone's pride. These small adjustments are invisible to others, but they accumulate inside you. By the time the evening ends, you've been managing more than just your own words. You've been navigating an entire emotional landscape. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, that the quality of your thoughts determines the quality of your life. To maintain quality in a crowded mental environment requires effort. You're constantly filtering, evaluating, and choosing responses carefully. This is why solitude feels restorative rather than lonely. In quiet moments, your mind can rest from constant interpretation. There are no shifting expressions to analyze, no hidden meanings to uncover. The stillness allows your system to reset. Seneca observed that to be everywhere is to be nowhere. When you're around many minds at once, your attention fragments. When you're alone, it gathers itself. That gathering restores clarity. It sharpens focus again. And it reminds you that your fatigue isn't a flaw, but a sign of depth. You may have wondered at times whether something is wrong with you. Why do simple gatherings leave you so tired? Why does casual interaction feel like work? But if you look closely, the pattern reveals something else. You're processing layers that others skip. You're noticing the unsaid, the implied, the concealed. Aristotle noted that the energy of the mind is the essence of life. Your mind expends energy generously in social settings. It moves quickly, mapping relationships and intentions. That energy expenditure is the cost of perception. There's also a protective element to this habit. Because you observe carefully, you're less likely to be manipulated. You sense when someone is being insincere. You detect when a narrative doesn't align with behavior. That awareness shields you, but it also means you rarely relax fully in crowded environments. Epictetus advised being careful, to leave your children well instructed rather than rich. In the same spirit, you leave conversations well informed rather than simply entertained. You collect insight rather than impressions, and insight requires attention. Over time, you begin to accept that this exhaustion is a receipt. It proves that your mind was active at a level the room couldn't see. Most people leave with a memory of what was said. You leave with an internal blueprint of how it was said, why it was said, and what it might lead to. That blueprint guides your future interactions. It informs your trust. It refines your judgment. It strengthens your discernment. The fatigue fades, but the understanding remains. When you recognize this pattern, you stop labeling yourself as antisocial or overly sensitive. You understand that your mind operates at high resolution. High resolution always demands more processing power. That demand isn't a defect, it's evidence of unusual sharpness. You don't simply experience social moments. You analyze them, integrate them, and learn from them. And although that depth can feel heavy at times, it quietly confirms what these habits continue to reveal. Your mind isn't merely participating in the world around it, it's studying it, decoding it, and refining itself through every interaction. But this very sharpness leads to a paradox that few understand. You're uncomfortable with your own intelligence. That surprises people. They assume a sharp mind walks around with visible confidence, maybe even superiority. They expect certainty, clear answers, strong declarations. But you often feel the opposite. You feel the weight of complexity beneath simple statements. You hear a bold claim and immediately sense the layers it ignores. You see how many variables sit beneath what others call obvious. Instead of feeling powerful, you feel cautious, not because you doubt your ability, but because you're aware of how much remains unknown. That awareness humbles you in a quiet way that others rarely understand. There's a psychological asymmetry at play here. Those who know very little about a subject often feel extremely confident. Their knowledge is small, so it looks complete from their point of view. There are no visible gaps because they haven't yet explored enough territory to see them. As your understanding expands, the opposite happens. The perimeter of your knowledge grows, and with it, the border between what you know and what you don't know becomes larger. The more you learn, the more you recognize how much is left to learn. Socrates famously said, He knew nothing. That wasn't false modesty. It was the natural conclusion of deep inquiry. The deeper you go, the wider the horizon becomes. So when someone calls you smart, you may hesitate. You may smile politely, but internally you flinch. Not because you reject the compliment, but because you see the unfinished edges of your knowledge. You think about the questions you still can't answer, the concepts you only partially grasp, the areas where your reasoning could still improve. This discomfort doesn't come from insecurity, it comes from perspective. Carl Jung wrote that the more knowledge you have, the more you see how little you know. That realization doesn't diminish you, it sharpens you, it keeps you grounded, it protects you from arrogance. People sometimes mistake this humility for weakness. They might wonder why you don't assert yourself more boldly, but what they don't see is the internal discipline behind your restraint. You choose your words carefully because you know how easily ideas can be oversimplified. You resist speaking with absolute certainty because you understand how often certainty hides blind spots. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. In a similar way, the greatest obstacle to clear thinking is the illusion of total knowledge. You refuse that illusion. You stay present with the limits of your understanding. This habit also influences how you approach learning. You don't chase information just to collect it. You pursue depth. You revisit concepts. You question your own interpretations. And when you realize you misunderstood something, you don't collapse into shame. You adjust. Seneca observed that it's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. You don't want to waste time pretending to know more than you do. So you invest that time refining your thinking instead. You accept that growth requires acknowledging gaps. That acknowledgement keeps your mind flexible and alert. There's a quiet strength in this discomfort. It forces you to remain curious. It prevents stagnation. While others may cling to confident but shallow conclusions, you continue exploring. You ask deeper questions. You look for counter-arguments. You test your own assumptions. Epictetus advised first saying to yourself what you would be, and then doing what you have to do. If you wish to be wise rather than merely informed, you must accept the discomfort that wisdom brings. That discomfort isn't an error in your character. It's evidence that your cognitive map includes its own blind spots. A mind that is aware of its blind spots is far more resilient than one convinced it has none. When challenges arise, you're less likely to be shattered by correction. You expect that you might be wrong sometimes. That expectation makes you adaptable. It allows you to update your views without collapsing. It keeps you open to new information instead of defending outdated positions. This self-awareness may make you quieter in rooms filled with loud confidence, but it also makes your conclusions sturdier when you do speak. Over time, you begin to see this pattern clearly. Your discomfort with your own intelligence isn't a sign that you lack it. It's calibration. It means your internal standards are high. It means you're measuring yourself against truth rather than applause. And while this awareness may prevent you from feeling effortlessly certain, it grants you something more valuable: precision. You move carefully, you think thoroughly, you remain teachable. In a world where many are satisfied with shallow understanding, your unease keeps you sharp. It ensures that your growth continues. And as these habits stack together, the picture becomes clearer. A mind that doubts itself in order to refine itself isn't fragile, it's unusually sharp. And this brings us to perhaps the most fundamental habit of all, the one that governs how you use the finite currency of your existence. You have a relationship with time that unsettles other people. You think about mortality, not in a dark or dramatic way, but with steady clarity. You understand that hours are non-renewable. Attention is finite. Energy spent carelessly can't be reclaimed. while many move through their days as if tomorrow is guaranteed. You carry a quiet awareness that it isn't. This awareness doesn't make you anxious, it makes you selective. It sharpens your sense of proportion. It forces you to weigh your actions against the limited currency of your life. Because of this, when someone pulls you toward drama, gossip, or endless arguments that lead nowhere, something inside you resists. It isn't judgment, it's calculation. You measure the cost. You ask yourself whether this conversation deserves a portion of your limited existence. You consider the hours required, the emotional toll involved, the potential growth gained or lost. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you could leave life right now, so let that determine what you do and say and think. That line isn't meant to frighten, it's meant to clarify. When you truly understand that time is finite, trivial matters lose their shine. You begin to treat each moment as something that must earn its place. This habit can make you appear distant. Others may think you're aloof or overly serious. They may not understand why you decline invitations without lengthy explanations. But you aren't withdrawing from life. You're protecting it. Waste troubles you. You see how easily hours dissolve into distractions that add nothing to your growth or peace. So you choose carefully. You invest your time where it builds something, where it deepens understanding, where it aligns with your values. This relationship with time also affects your ambitions. You don't chase goals simply because they're impressive. You ask whether they're meaningful. You weigh long-term consequences against short-term rewards. You consider whether a pursuit is worth the years it may require. Epictetus asked how long you're going to wait before you demand the best for yourself. That question echoes quietly in your decisions. Demanding the best doesn't mean chasing status. It means refusing to settle for activities that drain you without purpose. Your awareness of mortality also shapes how you handle setbacks. When something fails, you assess it quickly. You don't cling to sunk costs out of pride. You ask whether continuing would honor your time or waste it. This strategic thinking isn't coldness, it's realism. You recognize that every commitment carries an opportunity cost. Time spent in one place can't be spent elsewhere. Carl Jung wrote that your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Looking into your heart often means confronting how you're spending your days. When you see misalignment, you correct it. This clarity can feel intense to those who drift more casually. They may find your focus unsettling. They may wonder why you cut conversations short or leave gatherings early. But you aren't rejecting people, you're guarding your inner economy. Plato observed that the beginning is the most important part of the work. You treat each day as a beginning. You ask how it sets the tone for the life you're building. You don't want to scatter your attention so widely that nothing meaningful takes root. Over time, this habit deepens your sense of purpose. You become deliberate in relationships, choosing those that nourish growth. You become thoughtful in work, selecting paths that align with your principles rather than simply paying well. There's also a quiet peace in this approach. When you know that you're spending your time intentionally, regret loses its grip. You may not control outcomes, but you control investment. You know that your hours are placed where they matter most. That knowledge steadies you. It keeps distractions from dominating your schedule. It prevents resentment from building when others demand your attention without offering value in return. In the end, this relationship with time reveals something fundamental about your mind. You don't drift through existence. You measure it, you protect it, you use it as a compass. While others may chase every invitation, you weigh each one against your deeper goals. That precision isn't rigidity, it's awareness applied consistently. It reflects a mind that understands scarcity and responds with discipline. When you combine this habit with the others you've recognized in yourself, a clear pattern emerges. You examine your own thoughts. You grow restless in shallow exchanges. You revise your beliefs without ego. You see what's missing. You process social dynamics deeply. You question your own intelligence, and you treat time as sacred. These aren't random traits. They're interconnected signals of depth. A mind that values truth over comfort doesn't operate casually. It operates with precision. A mind that values truth over comfort and purpose over distraction doesn't operate casually. It operates sharply. And when you live with that awareness, you move through the world not in haste, but with intention, guided by the quiet certainty that your life is limited and therefore precious. If you recognize yourself in these habits, understand something deeply. Your mind isn't a burden, it's a responsibility. The clarity that isolates you is the same clarity that can build a life of precision, strength, and purpose. Don't dull it, refine it, don't shrink it, direct it. If this message connected with you, please take a moment to like this video. It helps others on a similar path find this content. And if you're committed to sharpening your mind and strengthening your character, consider subscribing to Stoic Mindset Mastery. We release new videos every week designed to help you choose awareness in a world that rewards distraction. There's another video on your screen right now that will help you channel this sharpness into something even more powerful. Watch that next and keep building the discipline your mind deserves.